Welcome to season 6 of the Lib Dem Podcast. It is 2024. It is a seminal year in politics, not just in Preston, not just in the UK, but the entire globe is having a huge year of democracy. Now, we are going to be with you right along that path with our wonderful panelists. Many of them are here on this episode, but we want to thank you all for supporting us over these years, from when me and Richard were recording them audio only on his couch to right to this point now where we get thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people listening to us every week, and we really do appreciate it. And we're going to talk about today some of the big stuff that's been going on. We've had our first real glimpse of the negativity that might be around this year in politics. We've had a glimpse at what the Tory right's going to do and what the polling is suggesting that might happen, and why you might need to think again of writing off the Tories just yet. We're all going to have multiple elections this year. All of us will have a police and crime commissioner election. Some of us will have locals, mayorals. We'll have a general election at some point. And we're going to tell you how to get the most out of this year, how you can end this year learning new skills, developing your area, and actually maybe even winning some seats going forward. And who better than this panel that we have today? And I'll welcome first Richard Kemp, soon to be the Lord Mayor of Liverpool. So we're getting in as much as possible before he becomes politically restricted. Hello, Richard.
Hi, I haven't quite been neutered yet, but that takes place on May the 15th. So I'll be very careful after that.
We'll get as much Kemp in the goodie jar as possible before that happens. We have Lisa Smart, who is our target parliamentary candidate for the wonderful area of Hazel Grove. Hello, Lisa.
Hello, John. Good to be back.
And joining our bang of wonderful target seats in the Northwest, we have Tom Morrison, our parliamentary candidate for Cheadle.
Hey, John. Good to be back. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom, for coming on. Happy New Year. And, of course, our partner in crime, the best ranter in podcast history, has actually got voted for. It was right up there with, all the top American shock jocks. We have Hannah Kitchen, the leader of the Barnsley Lib Dems. Hello, Hannah.
Hello, John. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year.
Well, we say Happy New Year, but I think, Hannah, and I'll come to you first, we've had a little bit of an inkling about what politically this year hold for us. Now, there's been a lot of things going on in the first 2 weeks of this year, and a lot of it has involved the post office scandal after that drama, and actually the horrendous treatment of the victims of that. And we should all remember the most important thing about this is to not forget about those victims and what they had to go through, and ignore the fact it's become a Westminster story of who can get who and who can blame someone more. It's actually about those poor sods that got treated like they did for so long. But what it did give us a glance into, Hannah, is actually some of what we might expect in this year, and actually some of the behaviour of some of the press towards Lib Dems in general, and particularly Ed Davey. So, Hannah, I mean, we have to be prepared for that, don't we? It's a general election year. This sort of stuff is going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen a real sort of lesson in what decades really of campaigning by committed individuals, culminating in a Christmas season television drama, can actually do for raising awareness of an issue. And it's absolutely a good thing that this story is finally getting the attention that it deserves, and in a way that will hopefully result in adequate justice and compensation for all the victims who were affected. But yeah, very interesting that the Conservatives and the right-wing press have decided to turn huge amounts of fire on Ed Davey, of all people. We're sort of used to being completely ignored by the mainstream media, aren't we? We don't exist. It's Labour versus the Tories, two-party system. We don't exist. And perhaps we were naive to think that when the spotlight did finally come onto us, it would be all positive and cheerful. I think that clearly the Conservatives are threatened by the Liberal Democrats in many of our target seats. They're clearly running scared, and they've, I think, rather cynically used what is a national cross-party scandal that they've turned it into some rather nasty kind of party political sniping and attacks. So yeah, I think a lesson to be learned there for us Lib Dems, that when we do finally get the limelight, we can't necessarily expect it to be positive, and we need to grit our teeth, see those attacks for what they are, and weather it out and focus on with beating the Tories, basically.
And I'm interested, Lisa, from your point of view, because you are taking on a Tory, you are a key target. So you have to be robust with what they're going to throw at you, I assume, and I suppose you're preparing yourself for what will be thrown at you and at what you do.
I don't think anybody decides, I'm going to be a candidate in a target seat unless you're feeling reasonably robust about yourself and what you can take. And I've done it a couple of times now, and some people really like the Lib Dems and like what we've done, and other people don't. And the 2019 general election, which you will remember was quite cold because it was a December election, and Brexit and Corbyn were the two key things that were discussed on doorsteps. And there were people who shouted at us in the street because they disagreed with our stance on one of those two issues, on either Brexit or on Corbyn. So you do have to be quite robust. I'm not saying that's okay to just shout at people in the street, by the way. That's not okay. There are better ways to make your point. There are better ways to make an argument than just shouting at people, or indeed threatening behaviour in other ways. So yes, you need to be robust. Yes, we as Lib Dems need to proudly stand up for our values and what we believe in, and that we think our team is the right one to represent people. But I think as Lib Dems, we're often quite nice, and that can mean we're not as robust as we should be. But I completely agree with you, John, that it would be an absolute disgrace if all of the fresh light that's been shone on this national scandal were to actually forget the victims and the people who have had decades of injustice, some of whom have been to prison, some of whom have lost family members, and that should remain the focus rather than any other aspect of this.
Yeah, and Richard, you've been, Liverpool politics has always had a bit of rough and tumble to it. I've seen some of your leaflets, but actually, you going into an election, we often say, politics is a contact sport. Any of us who have been in, me and Hannah talk at length on this podcast about, our experiences with Labour in the North are very different to experiences with Labour down south. And actually, it was really nice. Before bringing in Richard, congratulations firstly to Paul, who won the Salford by-election last week. And he came into ALDC HQ because he's going to be a lone Lib Dem councillor, basically on a council virtually controlled entirely by Labour. And it can be a lonely old place as a Lib Dem, but you just got to keep fighting, I suppose, Richard. And the ebb and flow of politics will always change.
Absolutely. I'm used to being the centre of vitriol, and was for a long time when we had a mayoral system in Liverpool. And at one time there were two of us and 81 Labour. So it was like a very unequal rugby game. But the two of us were very fleet of foot. So when they all scrummed down, we nipped through their legs and got the ball sometimes. I hope that was an analogy that pleases you, John.
Absolutely.
But yes, we've got to be robust. Frankly, when people would say to me, "You don't care what they say about you," I said, "No, frankly, I don't. I only care what people say about me if I respect them and their judgment. I think if it's just a load of people mouthing off, I couldn't care less. Over your head, get on with what you believe in, carry on the fight."
And Tom, I noticed on my Twitter feed, I did some. I checked my what kind of engagement I get on an average post. I'm out delivering this day, etc. And I got a 700% increase in one of my just standard posts. So unless the world has suddenly become interested in the tiny village of Mella in Ribble Valley, which I didn't have a hashtag in it. I had no mention of Lib Dem, but I had dozens upon dozens of what seemed like bots from Tenerife and everywhere else giving me nonsense. And so this is why this episode is called Block and Knock, because I suppose you're going to get all sorts of things. So block people online, go and knock on doors and win.
Yeah,
A useful reminder, John, that elections are not won on Twitter. They can be lost on Twitter, though. So if you are anywhere near the post button or send, you can tell I don't really use social media, can't you? Because I don't even know what the buttons are called. But if you've had a glass of wine and you're near social media and you're wanting to be an elected Liberal Democrat, step away.
Don't drink and type.
Tomorrow when you've sobered up.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
don't drink and dial.
Yeah.
I think there's the great Ian Roberts, who is a former councillor in Stockport, said used to use the phrase block, mock, or ignore. And that was his kind of social media strategy, which I think was pretty good. I think there is going to be a whole range of things that Lib Dems are going to get attacked with, that Labour councillors, candidates, politicians are going to get attacked with, and likewise the Conservatives were. I mean, the press are and I'll be honest, I think that the press are making this happen as well, because they keep on trading that this is going to be the most poisonous election ever. This is going to be, and it's just going to stir up more and more kind of hate. So I just think that the best thing to do is stay calm. I think Richard's comment of like he only cares if he has respect for the person that's slagging him off. It reminds me of there's an actor, I think it was Christian Bale, once said that if you want to criticize his work, that's absolutely fine. So phone him and do it. And if you don't have his number, he doesn't care what you think. And I think that's the way we should be playing this.
Yeah, and I suppose, and one of the things you can always get, I have a real worry with, so I use social media. Anyone that follows me knows I do, but I compartmentalize it. And I think that it is a tool for getting my message out rather than anything else. And one of the best ways, if you're feeling under pressure, one of the best things you can do is actually go and talk to real people. I know I advocate canvassing a lot, but actually I went out and did, I've done a couple of canvass sessions since the new year, and they are so genuinely life affirming, the fact that, the world on Twitter is not the real world. And actually, it's not full of xenophobes and transphobes and everything else. It's generally people who want to do right by other people and want to get along. So it is all, I mean, I'm obviously going to say, go out and do more canvassing. Have you ever listened to this podcast, you guys out there? But yeah, please go do that and do things that make you contribute to be able to win. And we're going to talk a lot about that later on in the episode. But let's go into the woes of Rishi Sunak, because he can't have a week without something terrible happening. And by the time this goes out, another scandal or another MP will have quit or something else. It looks like a party that's walking towards a destruction. So, and that, Lisa, brings us on to this MRP poll. It was a big poll of 14,000 people showing the Tories looking like they're in real trouble. What are your impressions from that poll? Does it seem to match what you're feeling on the ground?
So MRP polls have to come with a big pinch of salt. And I know Mark Pack has written at length and in depth about how you should interpret them. They can be useful to give a picture. One of the challenges with them is that they massively underplay the squeeze that's applied during election time. And they also assume that all of the parties are standing candidates all of the time. And they look at some uniform swing on a national level and then adjust for demographics and different things going on. So they can be a useful tool to give an indication of what that might look like. When you move it down to seat by seat level, I think there's a limit to their accuracy. And in places where there might be something that resembles a three-way split or a very large third-party vote, then they're even less reliable as to who's surging and who's not. So I think in places where it's a clear two-horse race, it's probably it's more accurate. But I think where there's extra parties coming in, just adjusting those third-party votes for national swing gives you less accuracy. One of the things it has done is just replicate what some of the earlier polling has already said. So if you just look at uniform national swing on some of the polls, it's already said the Tories are heading for a beating when it comes to the next general election. So I don't think it said actually all that much that's that new. It's just said it in a way that, as you say, John, has bin written up by the Telegraph and is timed for decision making by potential Tory rebels on the Rwanda vote.
And not only that, I mean, it's actually been, this polling was by YouGov, so that's reputable. I have no beef with YouGov. But who commissioned this poll was actually Lord Frost and what's left of the rump of Liz Trussites who who thought, you know what, it went so well last time, let's do it again, Tom. And it's chronically bad for the Tories. I think one of the other stats that came out this week, I think it's 93% of the country think that since 2019, the country's either stayed the same or got worse, and that includes Tory voters as well. They are in serious trouble.
Yeah, they are in serious trouble. And what I thought was really interesting about the poll that came out yesterday was that the director who did all the groundwork and oversaw the groundwork from YouGov actually did a long thread. I've forgotten his name. I started following him on Twitter last night. Is that he did a whole thread about how the Telegraph may have spun it slightly as well. So it's definitely worth looking into that and kind of understanding a bit more about the actual picture of that poll. I think anyone that's knocked on any doors over the last year or so knows it's tough for the Conservatives out there. But also anyone that's gone out and knocked on some doors will know there is a substantial amount of people that have not made their mind up yet.
Yeah.
And they're not sold on Labour. They are generally they would normally vote Conservative, and they're far enough away from the party now that they're really considering what they're going to do. But let's not be surprised when that goes into the 4-week campaign and suddenly the glitz of an election campaign starts and you have Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, Ed Davey, et al. All on the TV, then people will start being more focused. And that's when we've just talked about negative messaging. There will be so much more negative messaging being at the front of every news show, every newspaper. All of that messaging will kick in. And it wouldn't be surprised if a section of those, whether it's a large section or a small section of those undecided start moving back to the Conservatives. And that's why we have to do the work now. We have to knock on doors. We have to deliver leaflets. We have to start getting in front of those people so they're less likely to go back to the Conservatives and more likely to stay considering us and even voting for us when the general election is called.
Hannah, your views on this, and I wonder if you'd also like to think about one of the issues is obviously reform has come up. Now, actually, if you look at local election by-elections, reform are doing absolutely nothing. When it comes to real votes, reform don't seem to be making any increase. But I mean, there's a worry here for Lib Dems, because normally we'd say, oh, fantastic, split the right-wing vote, brilliant, great. Tom and Lisa will get more likely to be elected. But an awful lot of disgruntled Tories are voting Lib Dem. And does reform give them a different out?
I think it's interesting. I always take polls with a massive pinch of salt, particularly the type of polls that predict the Tories ending up with 4 seats or whatever it is we've seen in the fairly recent past. I think it's really hard to predict how parties like Reform will do. I think they still have a fairly solid, core of voters that will stick with them. People for whom the current Tory party still aren't quite right wing enough. But I do think that the way the media plays out, the way the political system plays out, when it comes down to a general election, people do get very entrenched in it'll either be Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. And for a lot of people, it boils down to that binary choice of, do we want Labour running the country or do we want the Tories running the country? And as Tom said, that's why we need to get in there early in our target seats to remind people that there is another genuine, viable option. Reform is a protest vote. That's all it is, really. It'll be for those Tories who are never, ever going to vote Labour, can't face switching to us because they're still in some sort of grump over the Brexit vote that they actually won, and won't vote Tory. That I think there'll be a protest vote, nothing more. But I think for a lot of people, it does boil down to that. Do I want Labour? Do I want the Tories? And in, the vast majority of the seats, that's the choice for people, like Labour or Tory. And I think that under those circumstances, a lot of those people who I've been out knocking fairly recently in Cheadle, which is Tom's patch, and obviously talking about the general election. And when I sort of compare that to sort of the by-elections I've been campaigning in more recently, the parliamentary by-elections, where the Tories really were really fed up and, not this time, and very clear that they were either going to sit it out or vote Lib Dem. I did certainly find some Tories who were hedging their bets, really, and I think are waiting to see how buoyant Labour are waiting for the Conservatives to give them something to make them feel like they can go back to them. And I think that anyone predicting the end of the Conservative Party is completely disillusional. Is that even a word? You know what I mean?
Delusional, not disillusional.
Delusional.
I don't know what disillusional means, but we'll assume they are that as well. Tom.
Yeah. Totally different words. Delusional. The Conservative Party will not die, and there will be millions and millions of people who will vote Conservative in the next general election, and we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, I was just going to come in and say, so the guy on who's worth checking out on Twitter is Patrick English, and he works for YouGov. It's at PME_politics is worth checking him out. And he exactly what Hannah's just said there. He also did a bit about so the Conservatives have, or the section of Conservatives have used this reform kind of vote opinion poll bump to say this is why we need to harden up the Rwanda bill on this. If we don't get it through, then it will cause us problems in the long run. And whilst there might be an element of that being true, is actually what Patrick English was saying is actually the data doesn't show that the reform vote will go straight back to the Conservatives. What it's doing, it's that protest vote is moved to reform. And if it doesn't go to reform, if reform were not to stand in Cheadle, that doesn't necessarily mean that all the reform votes will go back to the Conservatives. It could go to Labour, it could go to the Lib Dems, it could even go to the Greens if they were to stand. It is a protest vote that can't just be, it's not a uniform kind of swing from Conservative to anything. So I think all of this, we need to see this poll as it's basically been put out as with an agenda to push Rishi Sunak in one certain way, and actually let them scrap on that. We've just got to carry on doing what we're doing, which is delivering leaflets, knocking on doors, squeezing voters, that kind of thing.
Richard, why would they do it? Why are they? I mean, are these right wings just angling themselves for the post-Sunak kind of rebuild within the Tories? It does, it does seem like they have no problem with hurting the Tory cause in what they're doing.
I do think it's a sign of a party in decline, but like Tom, I don't think it's a party in terminal decline. There will always be a strong right-wing party in this country, and I can't see it being anything other than the Tories. Reform will come and they will go, because they have no philosophical base apart from not being moderate Tory. So they're a negative party rather than a positive party. I've been around long enough to have been told in 1973, I think it was, to go back to my constituency and prepare for government. And I certainly wouldn't want anyone who's watching this podcast to believe everything they read in a poll. What happened after that call to action was we did very well in the vote, about 20% if I remember, but we only got 11 or so seats. I think we went up to 13 seats, and there is no alternative than looking at our strategy and bloody well keeping it. Now, if the powers that be in party headquarters had done more number crunching than I could certainly do, and say we can go up from 30 to 40 or 45, and there's a rationale for doing that, because if you remember, that's what we did at the last general election, and that didn't work too well, did it? I think we just need to be out If you really think you're in it to win, bloody well do it. If not, get 2 or 3 target wards that you want to get for the next election and go and help wherever those clear target seats are.
Go on, Lisa.
So I agree with Richard. I think one of the dangers in polls like this is it sends people a bit loopy, and you look at a seat that's maybe a blue wall seat and they've applied uniform national swing, and somebody goes, look, we're only 9 points behind the Tories on this MRP. We can win. You know, we don't have any councillors. We've never delivered a leaflet. We've never knocked on a door, but we can win. We can win. We just need one more heave and then we get there. And so there's a real danger that we take our eyes, exactly as Richard says, we lose our head when it comes to targeting, and we start getting carried away and thinking, well, you know, I could decorate my office in Portcullis House and that would be lovely. I'd really be an excellent person to do that. And we forget that we actually need to do an awful lot of work in target seats to make sure we get over the line. So Richard's right. There's a lot of gains to be got in a general election, even if you're not in a target seat. You can be part of a target seat team. You can also have a look at some of your target wards and make sure if you're doing your election address, we should probably do a nuts and bolts operational how to get ready for a general election episode, John.
We are, don't worry.
But if you're not in a target seat, go and join a target seat team. You can see how a huge action day with 50 people is run and what it feels like and what it looks like, and learn and take the learning back to your non-target seat. You can also be part of a team. Just because you don't live in the boundaries of the constituency, it does, like Hannah said, she's been out in Cheadle, just making sure she knows she's always welcome in Hazel Grove. Thumbs up from Hannah, thank you. But you can be part of a target seat team even if you're not in a target seat.
I suppose, Lisa, I want to just wind back a little bit, because something that Tom said before, you know, the poll also shows that Labour getting a healthy majority. Now, again, the spin in the press was that Labour would have over 100 majority, but that was a majority over the Tories, not an outright majority. Their majority was only 65, I think, by this poll. So similar to what we did in our what if ones, that we were thinking somewhere in between, you know, maybe a 20 to 70 seat majority for Labour after the next election. But it becomes very difficult because obviously there's a big thing of it's a change election, it's a seminal election. You and Tom are in seats where Labour cannot win. They are never going to win Hazel Grove or Cheadle. So what are you saying as Lib Dems when they say, well, Keir Starmer's likely to be Prime Minister, what's the point in the Lib Dems? I'm really interested, and I'm sure our listeners are, is how you guys, as two absolute top-end campaigners, are saying on the doors.
So we give people accurate information. So we share with them what the results were last time, and we often express that through the medium of bar charts. And I had a lovely thing on the doors just before Christmas, actually. Somebody said, feeling quite grumpy about your bar charts. I just don't think you're accurate, and I don't think you tell us what we should know. I then got home from that canvassing session, and there was an email waiting for me that says, Lisa, I'm so sorry for doubting you. I got my ruler out the second you'd gone, and I can confirm that your exact measurements are precise. So thank you very much for that, and I'm sorry for doubting you. So I felt good about that. And bar charts are a helpful way, because not everybody's as engaged as we are in the process. And so helping people quickly get to the information they need is both sensible communications and campaigning, but it's also just the decent thing to do. We shouldn't have to make people work for the information. So bar charts is one thing. The other thing, both for Cheadle and Hazel Grove, but also Ribble Valley, actually, is that the Labour Party has decided sensibly, in my view, to concentrate its effort where it's going to have the most impact. And they have declared that some seats are non-battleground seats for them. So that means that they are not fighting those seats to win. And we're sharing that information with people, certainly in Hazel Grove. When it comes up on doorsteps, and it might be, you know, Labour members, Labour Party members, Labour supporters, who, if they live somewhere else, would like to vote Labour, explaining that Labour says it's a non-battleground seat is really useful, that they're not fighting to win, that there are seats nearby where they're absolutely marginal and they're concentrating their efforts there. So it's treating people like grown-ups and giving them the information that exists.
Yeah. And I suppose
if they don't want a Conservative in Hazel Grove, vote Liberal Democrat.
And I suppose, Tom, the argument that leads on from Lisa's is if these seats, like mine, Lisa's, and yours, are classed as non-battleground for Labour when they've got a 20-point lead, when those polls narrow, which they will, again, Lib Dems, don't panic, the polls will always narrow, that Labour have all but admitted they are not going to be the main challengers in those seats.
Yeah, exactly. This is, I think it's, and the key thing here is we can't stop repeating that message because when the polls do narrow and people will be getting, various bits of information, some nationally focused, some locally focused. That's why, and the bar chart is such an easy representation to show people what the race is. And I think, we often, there have been people that have mocked the bar charts and stuff like that, but that's only because they're effective. Like I've spoken to, I work professionally with members who are members of Labour Party and members of the Conservatives, a couple of members of the Green Party as well in my day job, and they all rinse me for the bar chart, but they all say, well, the only reason it annoys us is because it works,
and they now do it. They've all copied it, and they all exactly. So. But
some have copied it without knowing exactly how it's supposed to work, though. I've seen some classic bar charts going around.
It's like people delivering without a wooden spatula. It's like, come on, guys, you're bringing the whole professional class down. But Hannah. So let's just go. I mean, Tom and Lisa are eloquent as always. So that MRP poll did say that Lib Dems at 48. Which is, I think, is probably the upper scale of where we might kind of get to. But you know what? It's going to be a weird election. And I think what people and local parties need to do is use this election to better themselves. And like I said, like Lisa said, we're going to do a big episode on exactly what you can and can't do in a general election. Is it worthwhile having one unaddressed leaflet that goes to every house, having not spoken to them in the last 5 years? Probably not. And, and places like, I'm going to do a little plug, ALDC and people like that will have loads of advice, loads of templates. But what you are going to have to do, Hannah, is get ready. And so because we don't know exactly when the election will be, we're thinking it will be the second half of the year, but I don't trust the Tories as far as we can throw them. Certainly the general election templates I'm writing now for the party are going to be ready by mid-February. And you need to have them ready, designed, adapted, and good to go, because if you don't, you're going to miss those postal votes. So these are things you can do now, Hannah, to get yourself ready and for a general election.
Yeah, and I think, I think as a local party, you need to be very clear on what your electoral priorities are coming up, and that's made more difficult by the fact that we don't know when the general election is going to be. But it's not just a case of, not getting carried away, not thinking we can win seats that we can't win. I'm sure all of our listeners are aware of the ongoing series of training there's been around having accredited general election agents. Now, this is the kind of stuff that bores me personally to actual tears. You never, ever, ever want Hannah in any kind of agenting role. That would be a disaster. But it's really, really important. If you are a local party and you have not got any approved general election agents, you're not going to be able to do anything in the general election. So certainly, I probably shouldn't say this out loud, actually, I'll be in trouble, but there might end up in some regions being some sort of a system where we have kind of like a super agent, so someone sort of more senior in the party who is willing to be a super agent for constituencies, local parties who don't have any accredited general election agents. But that will be on the caveat that you do not spend a single penny in a general election. And so people need to be very mindful that it's not just a case of what do we want to do or what can we afford to do. It's also a case of who do we legally need to run all of this stuff past and and sign it off. And I think it's worth reminding people that if you are an advanced target seat yes, we are hoping that you are going to be one of those people that is an MP after the next general election. If you are a moving forward plus seat, it is possible that, over the next few months, if you keep hitting those targets, that you will be upgraded to a target seat as we go into a general election. There might be a very small handful of moving forward seats who also find themselves in that category. But if you're not in either, if your seat is not in either of those categories, you're not going to be getting an MP at the next general election. It just doesn't work like that. And we need our members and activists to think differently from the general public. So I've been a Lib Dem voter all my life, only been a member since 2016. Before I was a Lib Dem member, I genuinely thought I could get a Lib Dem MP in 2010. Like, I really genuinely thought that, because Nick Clegg, he was great. He was everywhere. And I voted Lib Dem in the genuine hope that that might result in me getting a Lib Dem MP. And we do want the general public to do that, please, despite not getting a single leaflet through the door or having ever met a Liberal Democrat in their entire lives, because that's how we retain deposits and that's how we get short money, and this is all great. But as members and activists, you need to recognise that it doesn't actually work like that. And while we're never going to stop anyone from voting Liberal Democrat, in fact, we're going to facilitate it by always standing candidates in every single seat all of the time. We need to put our very, very scarce resources, which is shoe leather and money, into actually getting MPs elected.
Richard, then Tom.
Yes, I am doing a lot of work with Lib Dem councils in the southwest at the moment, where there are a lot of our target seats. And some of the advice I'm giving them, because I don't do political advice in the work I do, is for them to play up the difficulties and the opportunities of their council. The councils, for example, that have upper tier in those areas or unitary, where they're being hammered on adult social care and saying what the Lib Dem administration is doing there. So we do tend to forget the importance of the council in this. But I've just had something pop up and it tweaked or whatever it was, and I looked at it. Councillor Mark Roberts, excited local councillor Claxon, really pleased that Romilly now has electric charging thanks to the priorities set by the Liberal Democrats. And I don't know which of those your constituencies it is, but we must keep that message going on, because actually that gives Lisa, by the sound of it, who was waving the hand, the opportunity to then talk about the green economy and what we could do more linked to what we're doing as a Liberal Democrat controlled administration. So if you're a loner, if you're an opposition group, keep plugging the fact that you bloody well care. You're always there. Even if you got someone elected, they wouldn't be in Parliament the whole time. They'd live still in their constituency and go to Parliament rather than live in London and come back. So there are things we must do to link up our campaigning at all levels, particularly where we're fortunate enough to be in control.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on, Richard. That video of Mark Roberts, I saw that today, and I've got to say, he did look very cold in that video. He looked absolutely freezing, the poor guy. So I was going to, it's something that Hannah said that reminded me of. So before I became the candidate in Cheadle, in the 2017 election, I was lucky enough to run to represent the Lib Dems in the People's Republic of St Helens North. And as Richard will know, St Helens North is probably not a bastion of liberal democracy. It's where they weigh the votes for the Labour Party there. But what I knew very well, obviously I knew we were not going to win. So what did I want to get out of it? There was going to be one hustings. So I knew I wanted to go and do that because I wanted to learn to do the hustings. There would be a bit of media because there was a bit of interest, because at the time the MP there was Conor McGinn, who had quite a dysfunctional relationship with Jeremy Corbyn. So I knew that I'd be able to be asked questions and get a bit of training on the media stuff. But also, I knew that eventually I wanted to run in a target seat. So I made sure that I would visit target seats. I spent quite a bit of time in Sheffield Hallam at that time as well. So I definitely saw Hannah there several times. But the reason I did that was because I wanted to do networking, to meet the people that were running campaigns. I got to meet, the director of campaigns. I got to meet all these people that would then help me later on when I was ready to go to a target seat to, kind of get that advice and get that support when I was ready to go forward. So it's not just about going to learn about campaigning and those kind of things, but it's also by going to target seats and going to helping those target seats, you're meeting the people that can help you later on when you're ready to go for a target seat.
One thing we want to kind of round off this episode is actually, for a lot of people, this general election might be their first kind of steps into the politics. So actually, I find politics fun anyway. I like a tussle, and I enjoy it, and I wouldn't be doing it for so long if I didn't. But actually, you've got to make these things fun as well. Make sure if it's not just a slog, enjoy each other's companies. Go have a drink, go have a coffee, go. I'm doing this whole thing at the moment of going around every single pub and cafe in my patch and absolutely loving it. Absolutely, don't shake your head at me, Richard. But making something of it so it doesn't just feel like a chore. And I suppose, Lisa, I'm going to let you sign off, because you've been, we've had some rough general elections these last few years. This one, I have genuine optimism for, but we realise that actually we want to be beyond this election. We don't want just to win now. We want you to be re-elected and re-elected after that. We want Lib Dems to establish themselves in new areas and win back areas that we've lost. So actually making it a fun and an entertaining thing for whether new or old campaigners is really important, Lisa.
It is, and making it fun in ways that work for different people, because not everybody wants to go to the pub. Not everybody enjoys delivering leaflets as much as you do, John. So it's about finding the ways that people can have enjoyment. And for a lot of people, it's about that sense of community, that joining the Lib Dems, finding your tribe, finding those people who are happy to talk about land value tax for 2 hours while you're stuffing the Christmas card, or whatever it is that's right for you. But for me, the thing that gets me going is getting stuff done. So I'm mildly interested in policy sometimes. I enjoy the campaigning. I enjoy the challenge of campaigning. But the thing I like most is when you change things, when you get stuff done, when you make things better. And it's people are bored of me saying it, I think, that we are a political party. We exist to fight and win elections so that we can improve our country. We are not a think tank where we just talk about policy all day. We are not a campaign pressure group where we're focused on one issue. And we are not a knit and natter group where we just, it's something that I do on a Thursday, is my little politics club. We exist to get stuff done. And that's why we need to focus on the areas where we can win and where we can get people elected, because that's how we make the country better. Thank you. I am off to scrutiny. Good night, everybody.
Mic drop.
Yeah, mic drop. Boom! Lisa has left the building. And I do want to say, Lisa's probably going to drop out at some point, but right at the start of this episode, I did have a little chuckle when she said, politics isn't about shouting at people. When Rishi Sunak visited her constituency, some of the residents didn't listen to Lisa's advice and let Rishi Sunak know exactly what they thought of him. But that was very, very funny. But to all our viewers and listeners, thank you very much for listening and watching today's episode. Do let us know what you want to talk about. And also, this is an open thing. And I'm thanking for all the really kind of views to our what if story when we did random scenarios. That has gone down really, really well. And I wonder if I should do it again with even more abstract ideas of what might happen. But we really appreciate it. Do let us know what you want to know about, and we will certainly do a specialist episode on that. We'll have loads to do with the general election. We'll have loads to do with coming up to the local elections as well. Lots of people like myself have local elections in May, which are really, really important, whether there's a general election on the same day or not. So keep listening, do subscribe. If you want to throw us some money by being one of our Patreon fans, we really appreciate it. And just stay warm in the snow. And just at this point, my dog's come and visited me, so that means I've got to go for a walk, and while you hopefully are listening to this podcast. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you with another one very soon.